I'm George. I'm the head of growth at Versori. I will be emceeing the conversation. With me, we have Harry, who oversees sales at Versori, and Paul, who is the CPO at ZigZag. ZigZag is a returns platform and also one of the first customers of Versori. So today we can cover a few things. I'll give these two gentlemen a quick chance to introduce themselves, and then we're going to hop into some specific questions around how ZigZag looks at integration, and particularly around how they're approaching their strategy of using that integration or using an integration marketplace as a growth engine as they look to expand across the retail world. And then we'll touch on kind of more specifics and some questions at the end. But to start, Paul, would love to if you could give yourself a quick introduction, maybe a little bit about your journey at ZigZag, and also give maybe a quick 30 seconds on what ZigZag does.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, George, and hi, everybody. As you rightly said, I'm Paul, so I'm the Chief Product Officer here at ZigZag Global. I've been with the company around 5 years now, so approaching 5 years. Come from a retail bricks and mortar background originally, but been in software delivery for around 16 years now. Obviously head up the product function here at ZigZag, so we would class ourselves as the most connected post-purchase and returns network. I guess the main thing that we're looking to do is give retailers a frictionless convenience. So through global carrier choice, automation of workflows, real-time insights to really turn returns into a strategic advantage. Thanks for having me along today. It's great to see you.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. And then Harry, you want to hop in and give a quick 15 seconds?
Yeah, I'm Harry. As George mentioned, lead everything to do with sales and sort of account management here at Versori. So that's working with clients like Paul to work with them on their sort of integration strategy, whether that be sort of one-off integrations or working with them alongside building out their integration connector marketplace.
Awesome. So for today, I'm going to start with a few kind of quick questions just to tee up some context for everybody. We'll then get into some specifics on a particular Versori ZigZag project, which I hope paint the overall picture of what we're looking at. And then we'll kind of leave some time for questions from people at the end. So I want to set the scene with why integrations are important for ZigZag, because being an integration platform, we see that they vary massively across industry. For some companies, it's all about the solutions team and their integration. For some, it's about an integration marketplace, and it's all about, can customers one-click connect and self-serve a bunch of tools? And so, Paul, I was hoping you could paint a picture of when you sell a retailer or a new account at ZigZag, what does that implementation process look like? And where does integration become part of that process, particularly if it becomes a bottleneck in that roadmap?
Yeah, I think traditionally, maybe a few years ago, returns was seen as almost the end of the process. So we were a small closed loop system. Certainly in my time here, that's absolutely not the case now from the returns angle. Retailers are definitely seeing more and more that returns is maybe the start of a new journey rather than the end of one. I think retailers have been coming to us for a number of years looking to turn returns into one of the richest data events in commerce. It was pretty clear that through them onboarding to us, that it's quite a smooth onboarding process to get returns live. But then obviously retailers have got a lot of other great e-commerce systems in their stack that they like to use. But traditionally, going back a couple of years, it was quite siloed. So they were doing certain things across loads of different systems. And I think you hit onto the repeatability point already, George. I think that's really important for our retailers, is to come and do something really valuable and impactful with the returns data. So it might be learning about product returns and feeding that back into the product managers on their side to improve products, but it might be empowering refunds quicker and at a more confident rate. It might be automating certain rules and dispositions. There's a bunch of workflows that people have come to us with, but obviously they're not expecting us to integrate to build that as feature sets directly in our platform. They're coming to us and almost saying, we've got these great stacks in place, guys, come and meet us where we're already at. And I think that's been the key, really.
Yeah. And so it's interesting you mentioned them saying, meet us where we're at. I know me and Harry often find working across retailers, they might already have a dedicated iPaaS. A lot of retailers have a Boomi or a Celigo, someone, maybe slightly older in technology, but they've worked with for a decade. I'm curious, like, how you bridge that conversation, maybe more as a commercial question than a product question, but how you think about pushing for your integration stack, something that you're confident with, how it works, it's high quality, it's built well, versus letting them use their integration system that maybe is slightly less in your control.
Yeah, I think as soon as you make them realize we've got pre-built connectors available, which we've already done that standardization of events to make the not only the onboarding easy, but it's about the impact and the value delivery. So I'd agree. I think a lot of people have already taken a look at integrations. They may have their own integration platforms. Some of those integration platforms may even have connected to ZigZag in the past as well. I think when you can come with a blueprinted model where you've already got a lot of that plug and play ready, and you can get up and running within hours. I wrote days within my notes, but the reality is within hours. So let's call it as it is. I think that really appeals to people. I think even the businesses that have got the largest engineering departments or are really tech savvy are still looking for that from us. They want us to really reduce that friction to get going quickly. They want to have a system that they can trust. It's about a system not only they can trust in the B2B sense, but also that they know that their customers can trust as well. Because of course our return solutions are going out to their customers. So they're putting a lot of their world in our hands, as it were.
Yeah. And leading product at ZigZag, the question you always feel like everybody always comes up with in integrations is build versus buy. Engineers can write integration code, and with Claude models and OpenAI models, these are getting easier and easier. But equally, there is a huge amount of work to think about, from maintenance, hosting, monitoring, all the things that as Versori we kind of really focus on as a value point. I'm curious how you're thinking through, how you thought through the build versus buy decision with ZigZag.
Yeah, it's a great question. We obviously still do build a lot of integration connectivity within the infrastructure that we've got. I think it's a no-brainer on the after returns data to look at something really repeatable. But the word that I'd probably use here in terms of the buy decision or the partner decision for ZigZag and Versori is more about that scalability. One of the key wins for me and with making the decision and taking the decision into our exec team to ratify that decision of becoming partners was around the scalability, was around the self-heal element of the platform. Because the worst thing you can get stuck, in my opinion, is in that trap where you can consistently not only building, but there's a maintenance drain on your engineering resource. And I think you're right. I think Claude Code and the external tools is coming to help that, but not in a packaged way, in a platform that I trust is already looking after it for us. And I think that's the real thing for me. It's scalability, it's self-heal, it's all of those lovely things that you go through in different versioning examples across the world that we operate in. And as we said in the intro, I think that the e-commerce stacks that are in use by many of the retailers, certainly that we come into contact with, is absolutely growing exponentially. It's not shrinking. So that maintenance burden just gets exponentially more difficult to handle unless you're careful and you make the right decisions.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Harry, actually, just to jump to you too, you work across ZigZag and a number of our other large customers. One, do you want to paint a quick 30 seconds about what Paul is referring to in terms of like self-healing and post-integration development? And then also maybe about how you look at build versus buy in terms of explaining to customers why, sure, they can write all the code, but the platforming it is by far the approach long-term.
Yeah, definitely. I'll set for those listening in that don't have too much context on Versori, I'll just give a really top line overview on what our mission is and what we do as a business and as a platform. So essentially our mission at Versori is to reduce the time, cost and risk of building and maintaining integrations in-house. So traditional integration projects can be slow, brittle, and expensive, sometimes taking months to deliver. And as Paul mentioned there, with Versori, it can be hours to days to build out the integration. Obviously, then there's some sort of testing prior to obviously go live, or a number of days of testing, etc., to make sure all the edge cases are built in. So we've flipped the model on its head and designed our platform for speed, flexibility, and that sort of scalability as well, with the sort of runtime agent. So essentially, our platform is built of sort of 4 primary facets. The first is to help you with the research and planning of a particular integration. So utilizing AI prompting, our system helps and assists in providing that technical architecture between the platforms, provides the API documentation. It does like a sort of web scrape, web search to pull in that. Does everything from data mapping and specifications and technical best practices as well. Then we've got the authentication side of things. So AI essentially goes out and detects the authentication of the particular systems, whether that may be a WAUth, API key, bearer, token, etc., or basic auth. And then it configures that sort of authentication parameter, etc. Then you've got the code agent, which generates custom sort of enterprise grade code, which is sat around our Versori Run SDK, which is really the sort of core IP of our business. So that's everything that is sort of around the authentication and credential management, your key value store, your server infrastructure, even to things like pagination logic and API rate limits, etc. And then finally, what we were talking about there is the runtime of a particular integration. The runtime agent sits on top, essentially, of the integration, not within it, and that monitors in real time to track performance throughout the integration, tracks the health continuously, and it also provides alerts to teams of any issues before that sort of escalates into any outages, etc. So we have like sort of full logs for transparency in there as well. So that is the Versori platform. We operate on 2 ways with yourselves at ZigZag. We've taken some of the built in-house, but we also do provide training on the platform to specific engineers, which is another way businesses are utilizing Versori as well. But yeah, in terms of the sort of next part of the question, in terms of when we are working with businesses to understand whether it's for them to build in-house or for them to outsource it to Versori, some of the things that we say for them to do are conduct some customer surveys or interviews with current customers and understand if there's any efficiency gains in doing some of these integrations. Then also speaking to the sales teams as well. Is there any lost opportunities? I know we were speaking one tech company the other week, George, and they had lost, I think 64% of deals had been lost due to lack of integrations. So it's benchmarking all that data and understanding, will this actually increase revenue for the business if we have this particular integration, and being proactive rather than reactive to customers as well. Yeah, hopefully I've, in a roundabout way, answered some of those questions.
Yeah, no, for sure. So in the name of time, I want to hop and turn this from hypothetical conversation into a little bit of reality. And so we're going to talk a little bit about one of the integrations we've actually built for ZigZag, which is into Brightpearl. And to start, Paul, I was wondering if you can just paint some color as to why this particular integration was important to ZigZag, maybe a little bit about why you saw it as a higher priority integration to get built.
Yeah, sure thing. So originally with Brightpearl, we'd got a handful of retailers wanting to onboard to us. They'd come into our sales funnel really well enlightened. They knew exactly what they wanted to do with their returns into a separate system like Brightpearl. They were just struggling a little bit to know quite how to do it. They weren't really sure of what integrations were available. I think, Harry, as you've said there, the great thing in the platform is in the early days, Brightpearl wasn't a system that ZigZag knew a lot about either. The way the platform's set up, allowing us to come and do some initial research was really strong. Even in those first procurement calls between us and the retailers, it helped us at the base level just to understand what they might be wanting to do. So yeah, in the initial examples, it was as simple as keeping a base stock and financial data in sync, making sure that they didn't lose sight of replenishment activities, because they'd had some poor examples in the past where, because they've got siloed return systems, they weren't connected. So they were looking to us to solve that problem very quickly of mismatched inventory. The main impact that was affecting the customers, of course, was the delayed credit or delayed refunds that would come as a result of that. The main thing for the first wave of retailers for us was that it was around return merchandise authorization, so RMA triggers. So once certain things had happened within the returns flow, they could trust that the integration is there to then raise sales credits or give that positive flag to say that the refund can occur. So that's probably the biggest thing that they were looking for us to do.
And from a core strategy perspective, of course, building a set of pre-built integrations is a great way to cover, as a sales team, being able to go, we already have that integration. Here's an example of it working. It's a really powerful sales tool, particularly at the enterprise level, where you're asking a customer to go on a pretty big transformation journey that has a pretty big impact on their overall kind of image to their customers. But nobody ever wants the same integration. Everybody always wants a slight variation, a slight tweak. So I'm curious, like, how did you think about that when building Brightpearl, but also like overall when thinking about how to strategize your approach to integrations?
Yeah, let's be frank and transparent. The first couple of times we thought about it, we got it wrong. We weren't able to do that multi-threading. We were looking to find a way to make some of these things repeatable when we didn't accept that they weren't and they wouldn't be. And that's probably an eye-opener through the initial phases of working together. And that's part of our growth and knowledge and understanding. So I think now we can do multi-tenanted, multi-threaded connections using the Versori platform. That puts us in a really powerful position to take in those smaller retailer nuances. They certainly feel smaller and nuanced now compared to trying to build a really static connection where you're going to struggle to copy it, and then you've got multiple versions to then look at and maintain. Very, very glad those days are behind us. But yeah, it's exactly right. It's about that repeatability. That's probably what I was referring to when I mentioned scalability. Because as you say, you might be lucky that the first batch of 5 retailers come along and they want something very similar, and it's small tweaks, but then you'll get somebody else that's using Brightpearl that's wanting something completely different. So the fact that we can use almost the boilerplate for all of the authentication stuff, and we can use the blueprints we've already got and then change small amounts of them to hit those use cases a bit better is phenomenally powerful for us. And of course, it means that we can do that without development resource. So oftentimes when we're doing self-serve within the platform, we're using implementation level resource. So still technically savvy and technically capable people, but we're not then having to leave that into a development queue and prioritize it against other development work. It allows us to shift the model and become a lot more dynamic and agile, which I think is another thing that we were looking for when we were reaching out for a partner and we were doing our own tender processes and investigations.
Yeah, no. And Harry, do you want to paint a little bit of color for the people watching who are not maybe that familiar with Versori around how the product unlocks the ability to duplicate integrations, and the fact that as with an agent, you don't necessarily need to understand the integration you're looking at to be able to hop in and make tweaks, and how that makes it more dynamic for a solutions team?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we work with obviously an array of different businesses, and one of the sort of core challenges that a lot of businesses face is when they're building an integration, they need an integration that works for multiple end tenants. So within the platform, we have this embedded approach. So ZigZag could build an integration to, let's say, Shopify, which has multiple end users, but each end user needs slight variations of that particular integration. So obviously they need their own credentials, sometimes their own sort of configuration and settings in there as well. So even though the core logic of the integration will remain the same, each deployment can be customized through configuration variables within the UI of the platform, which makes it obviously reusable for these end tenants. So essentially you're building once but deploying to many different customers, which is a really big upsell. Previously, as Paul mentioned there, integrations were very static, and if you were looking to bring on another customer, then you've got to completely rebuild that integration for that specific end user. But within the platform, you've got the ability to provide your own authentication credentials, your own instances. For example, let's say a user is on QuickBooks, they can add their company ID for QuickBooks, add variables. If a product doesn't exist in, let's say QuickBooks, create it as a miscellaneous item. You can set in the US, for example, your own tax rates, etc., your own warehouse inventory location ID. So things like that. And then there's certain things around sort of field mapping and data transformation. Even the way that sort of data is structured, your date format, is it month, day, how the Americans have it, or is it day, month? So certain things that you can adjust within the platform, which makes these integrations, you're building it once, you've got many tenants can use it rather than having to go away and build integrations specifically for these end customers each time. So it can be a really powerful way for businesses to unlock revenue, obviously what ZigZag are doing.
And that's certainly what we found, Harry, to be fair, whether it's Bright Pearl, whether it's some other systems we're connected into, the triggers on the ZigZag side are often the same. We're often looking at doing something as soon as a return's requested or as soon as a tracking update's received, go and do a certain event. So we've certainly found, as we've started to build out the connector library that we've got with you guys, that becomes even more valuable to us. So once we've understood the platform, once we've received the training and we're doing the self-build, as I say, the triggers on the ZigZag side are really easily repeatable in the tools that we've got in our hands, which is great.
I want to ask one more question and then going to open the floor to some questions from the audience. So for people watching, if you guys have questions, feel free to start dropping them in the chat, in the little chat icon, and I'll read them out. But I'm curious, we're very early in this journey between Versori and ZigZag. We built our first few integrations. Paul, as you mentioned, we've hit some bumps in the road about how we think about the stability and rigidity versus enough flexibility to account for how much retailers want their integration to vary. What does 2026 look like for you guys? Like, how are you thinking about evolving this strategy, and where are you hoping to be in 12 and 24 months?
Yeah, ultimately, we're moving into a world where we're into what we would call ZigZag 2.0. So we've got some phenomenal new administration interfaces coming into the world. We've got some phenomenal new returns portal releases. So for me, the vision for us is to embed a curated integration marketplace inside those new UI. So to have the power to allow the retailers to come and self-serve the integrations that we've got off the shelf is great, because now we're up and running with the builds. Oftentimes, the most difficult part of the process is getting the right credentials to use. Yeah, the main vision for us is to have this embedded inside the retailer hub centrally as an administration product for retailers to not only come and see what we've got, but to also then maybe request some other integrations they might be interested in. Because as I said earlier, I think the e-commerce stack mentality that the retailer's got is going to continue. Yeah, and it's important for us to keep up with that.
No, for sure. And you raise an interesting point. How do you think about prioritizing that? Like, how are you thinking about owning an integration versus pushing it to a partner versus pushing it to an SI, and effectively being like, this is truly a one-time integration, like we're going to have an SI build it? I'm curious how you're splitting that dynamic.
Yeah, it's pretty clear for me at the moment. We do our carrier integrations completely in-house. I'm aware that it's something that Versori would be capable of doing. It's just something that on our side has been the preference. We've got a huge carrier integration library that we look after ourselves. So we take that off the table almost immediately and prioritize in our own internal teams to do the carrier integration builds. For anything that's coming post-purchase side, for anything that wants to go post-returns into external systems, we're always bringing to Versori straight into the system to try and understand what's possible first, and doing some business analysis around what the reseller wants to do versus what's capable.
Yeah.
Prioritization wise, we've got a very clear sort of 10 to 15 connector roadmap on top of what we've already built, mainly based on what either our current clients are. So as a retention strategy to try and reach out and allow them better connections, or also as an acquisition strategy. So we take a very good handle of what new retailers are wanting. If they're considering ZigZag for the first time, we're looking at the complexity and the flows as soon as we understand them to prioritize it into the systems. But it's an exciting time with a lot of connections required. I think we've got a very clear steer on the top 15 to 20 that we want to go and achieve this year.
Yeah, no, I think we're entering a period where the rate at which integrations can be built, the speed, and also the reduction in resource it takes is only going to lead to, I think 2-3 years ago, if you told someone you were going to build 20 integrations in a year and then told them that you had a couple of people working on that, they'd think you're slightly insane. But now, particularly Versori's like platforms like Versori, you've got, as we mentioned, like increasingly the availability of large language models and other tools that help you reduce that human input. So last question from us. Is the future about removing humans from integrations in its entirety? Or do you, even if that was possible, do you still see an important value add in having a human in the loop when a retailer's talking about integrations and wanting to understand how ZigZag approaches integrations overall?
I think humans are very important still in the process. I think to build that trust in systems, that we've certainly found that the implementation side of hand holding and the BA side of analyzing what a retailer needs absolutely does benefit still from the human touch. Even if the retailer is well aware that we're using those tools, it's almost like they want us at the moment to help them drive those tools. There's still evidence that they're using those tools themselves as well, but they almost want to do that so they're in the conversation and they're understanding what we're talking about when it gets a little bit technically complex. Still very much liking to show us what they want rather than give us a briefing pack of exactly what to do. So I think the human touch is still really useful there. I think the key driver for me is what you said, George. When we can do these things quickly at scale with 2 people rather than needing an integration team of 5 or 2 integration teams of 5. So we've got 10 developers on it. I think now we can output at this quality repeatedly. That's the really key differentiator, because retailers are aware that their margins are tight. They can't invest themselves heavily. They've got high expectations. They're certainly seeing integration speed as being growth speed. So I think we share that. And I think that pre-built ability to then faster onboard is maximized by using the tools. But I certainly don't think we're at a point where you're going to remove humans from the process just yet.
Yeah.
Interested to know what you guys think there.
Yeah, Harry, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet. I think it's essential to have a human in the loop. I think with some of the clients we're working with, and yourselves included, we know that when an error comes up, it's better to have somebody there beside you to try and fix the issue rather than just relying on AI to go away and address the problem. Because 9 times out of 10, it's more about the context rather than the actual issue, and having a human that understands the context of the particular scenario to fix the integration is key at the moment. We'll see if AI gets there in a few years, but I still think we're a few years away from it being totally autonomous anyway.
Yeah. So I want to quickly summarize the 2 questions we have in the chat. I think they actually both cover roughly the same thing. We have a lot of conversations with companies that produce large integration roadmaps, 200, 300, 400 connectors, about what is the commercial dynamic here. Are these free and you're absorbing the cost? Are these small monthly subscriptions that you're paying for on top of your software subscription that allows the provider to recoup some of that investment? Or are these profit centers? And we've actually, interestingly, Harry and I have seen a bit of a dynamic of a few people now really looking at how do we turn integrations to another revenue stream. I'm curious, Paul, how maybe you don't need to tell us how ZigZag's planning to do it, but what your perspective is on that. If the concept of moving integrations to a kind of a revenue driver is something being a reality, or if you see that idea being not something that becomes truly mainstream.
No, I think the ability to make it a chargeable revenue stream is there. I think you do see it, certainly from our perspective, you do see a wild mixture where some basic connectors, certainly retailers would think are base need, wouldn't consider paying you any extra money for something so simple. Their expectations are exceptionally high in terms of keeping systems in sync, whether they rock up with one system that's really well maintained with great data, or whether they rock up with 100 that's got quite poor data and they've already got their own sync issues, is irrelevant when they're choosing a returns provider, from my experience. But for some of the more complex stuff, when you're talking at that scale that you just mentioned, I absolutely think that retailers are open-eyed to accepting that it takes some firepower to do these things. So whether it's an implementation fee, whether it's a monthly fee to cover the volume that's going through platforms, I think we've seen quite an open approach from retailers. They're keen to know what we want rather than dictate to us what they think they should have. Of course, we'll negotiate afterwards. But yeah, I think there's all sorts of examples. Get some people that want it in their base subs. If you've gone for a SaaS subs model, there's some people that are happy to pay based on a transactional rate. It's quite the spectrum.
Yeah. Awesome. I know we're running up towards time, and it doesn't look like there are any other questions in the chat. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to Paul for taking the time today. Really appreciate it. If anybody is interested in learning more about ZigZag, when you see our follow-up email, that'll be linked at the top of that email. So feel free to take a look at the website and book a call with the ZigZag team. If you're interested in learning more about Versori as an AI native IDE for integrations, feel free to also check out our website.